So the first question on classroom management has to do with if you planned something and it goes awry. So what happens if your craft or your game that you've planned isn't going like you had thought it would go, and it's causing more of a ruckus and it's more of a problem? Should you just keep barreling right through and continue the craft? Should you redirect? Should you chuck the whole thing and do something else? What is y'all's opinion on how to handle that?
Yeah, I think it should be a reflection on you. You're the leader, so if your expectations aren't clear, then if it's a ruckus and the kids are going crazy, that's probably more of a reflection on how you delivered the message and the directions. And so I would stop and I'd pivot, and I would kind of not put the blame on myself, but maybe either try to make my expectations clear or just pivot to something completely different. That's happened to me many times, whether it be in the classroom or at church, but I can clearly tell that my expectations were not clear enough, and I stop right in the moment and I say, okay, let's try this again. I will be a little bit more clear, because I do think it often reflects on the teacher instead of the kids.
Well, and no one's getting anything out of it,
Right.
if
Sure.
that's going on, and if someone lets it continue at that point.
Yeah, and what I have found is when that happens with me, either I haven't prepared well enough. In other words, I haven't taken the time to do the activity myself and see how it's going to play out, or I just haven't prepared well enough. So, part of it, like you said, is on you. Either you didn't prepare well enough or you didn't explain it well enough. So,
And that's what I would practice. Like, if we're talking about, I think that's one of the biggest things that teachers, beginner teachers, I know for me, is if you don't go over an activity, or if you don't kind of do it yourself, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure of like what's going to happen. At least when you try something out yourself, you kind of know what to expect, and knowing what to expect is really big in a classroom, so you can kind of be a little bit more clear on possible things that the kids might have trouble with.
And those, like you said, those kind of gauging how long it's going to take, or will this work, for your activities, that will come easier the more you teach.
And sometimes even if you go in having a good game plan and you know this should work, sometimes it's still not going to work with that. Maybe it's that group of kids, maybe it's just something that, it can be a number of things that you did a good job explaining it, you had the high expectations, and it's still just in the middle of it, you're like, oh my goodness, this is flopping.
Yeah.
And so it happens to everybody, and just be willing to say, okay, we're gonna stop or go back to our seats, or let's do something else, and just don't take it hard to don't have that stop you from starting a fun activity in the future, wanting to plan something, because it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
Where it's just a big
Right.
dumpster fire in front of you. So
And you'll get better at it in time.
Yeah.
You learn from it, and you self-reflect, and you make changes as
Yeah.
it is needed, and you move right on.
Yeah.
Everybody at this table's had an activity flop, right?
Oh, for sure.
Everybody.
Yes.
So
For sure.
it's not anything unusual for that to happen.
Right.
So don't let it be a discouragement.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah,
we're
that's
trying
the
to
word.
say.
That's the word.
There you go.
All right, so we've all taught class on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and there's a vast difference in the way the kids behave on Sunday morning and Sunday nights. On Sunday mornings, you can hardly get them to speak, they're tired, they're groggy, and then on Wednesday nights, they are generally more hyper and excitable. So how can we change our approach to the kids on Wednesday nights versus Sunday morning?
I think it's good to get them moving, because they just need to get out that energy. And so, for instance, Molly.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you a kid that can't stop laughing
Something, or get
Yeah.
silly
Or,
because
or
they
as
get,
we would say with
Yeah.
the smaller students, have self-control.
Right.
Right.
Please help.
So I think when you prepare activities that make them more, where they can move around the room more and things like that. Sunday mornings, I think you have to engage as well, because you've got to wake them up. But I think you have to have more patience. Personally, if it was me, I would want to teach on Sunday mornings, but that's just me, Wednesday nights. So Wednesday nights, I just think it just needs to be maybe a little less. You need structure, but I think you're going to have to be a lot more open to ideas and change fast.
Yeah,
Because what you might take 10 minutes to do, you might do in 5.
yeah.
And especially for students who are on medication for ADHD or anything like that, medicines usually run out at that time, and they can't help it. And they're ready to go to bed a lot of times or just go home because they're tired. All the kids are tired. Everybody's tired.
Yeah.
So,
And I think there is a fine line between keeping the consistent routine and doing what you're saying.
right. I think you have to I think you gauge the climate of your classroom, and if they need movement, you move them.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think Wednesday night is a good night to do, like if you're gonna do an activity that requires outdoor. In the summer, it's still light outside, and so you could take them outside and do something out there that allows for more energy and more noise versus in the classroom when
Right.
there's maybe an adult class next door or something, and you need
Right.
to kind of keep it down. So I like doing things outside with them when I can. When the weather's nice and
Yes.
it's daylight, but. And even like on Sunday morning, you could do that too, to kind of wake them up,
Yes.
take them outside.
Or just even walk down the hall and make it, some kind of activity that relates to your lesson, Because sometimes they just need to move.
Yeah. So the next question has to do with a child's behavior. Is it better to address a child's minor misbehavior, such as continually talking out of turn or not paying attention or messing with the child next to them, in that very moment that the behavior's happening? And to tell them we don't do that right away in front of all the other kids? Or is it better to just keep teaching and ignore that minor misbehavior and then change your lesson in the future to prevent that from happening?
Right. I often think that things like that are going to happen regardless of what your lesson is. And I think the speed of the lesson is important. But I also know when you have kids that are sitting there talking, say Dylan and I are over here laughing or talking about something, and then I'm up here trying to teach and they're totally off task. You have most often two other teachers in the room with you. I feel that I might make some kind of signal or something to one of my co-teachers and have them come over and just gently lean down, and if it gets so bad, have one move. You don't have to make a big episode about it, and discreet is the best way. You never want to humiliate a child or embarrass them. They will never forget it. and
Especially in that atmosphere.
No, yes, and they will be embarrassed in front of their peers, and you've lost. The relationship you had may be over, and then that just leads to other issues. But that's my opinion. The least is the best, and the most discreet is better.
I also
Yeah.
think go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you on that and just say that, I think you don't want to do something to cause their faith to be shaken.
Exactly.
In other words, you don't want them to be so embarrassed that they don't want to come back to class.
Right.
And because they feel so much shame by being or by talking and being
Right.
misbehaving, when it really wasn't a major problem,
No.
but we made it into a major problem.
Yes.
And we more shaken their faith than
Exactly.
anything. So
Yes.
But we also can't be afraid to address something either.
No.
That's really important too. And I think along with that, focusing on the positive behaviors that are going on within the classroom. I've seen a couple of our lower grades teachers do this several times. They just might have some stickers sitting next to them, and they have noticed like 2 4-year-olds maybe goofing off or tickling each other, and then they just picked up the stickers and they said, "Oh, Janice, you're sitting so nicely. Mindy, you're sitting so nicely. Molly, you're sitting so nicely. Laura, you're sitting so nicely." And they went and they gave all of the ones that were sitting nicely a sticker. And then by the time they got to all of the rest of them, the other 2 were sitting there. And then just like the rest of them were. And then they continued on with their lesson. So I think definitely focusing on the positives versus
And
sometimes.
that goes back to relationship building. If you have a relationship with the kids, they're not going to take your redirections or your expectations and maybe crush them. If you are taking the time to build that relationship, you can do both. You can have high expectations and you can build a relationship. And that is why it's so important, because a kid really could get crushed and their faith, go away, because if you don't have the relationship with this teacher who is just coming down hard on you, then that can really have an effect on kids.
And when you have those strong relationships, like you were just saying, there's not going to be, it's going to be a lot easier to pull that student aside later on, especially if they're a fourth, fifth, or sixth grader, and as they're leaving and no one else is around, you can say, you know what, during class we were learning about this, and this is what I saw you do. So when you come back on Wednesday night or when you come back Sunday morning, I would like for you to try and sit this way, or try to speak this way instead of the way that you were speaking to me, or as a teacher, or to your friends next to you. And I think if you have those strong relationships, they're going to receive that so much better, and then their faith will not be shaken.
Right.
You don't have to say anything. You can just,
Right.
just put your hand on them,
Right.
and their behavior changes. Because you.
Just proximity, just
Yes,
being near
for
them, which is where your other two teachers can come in
Yeah.
to play, just to move their chair closer.